global high table, now playing a very different game, punching in a different weight category from the weight category of a few years ago. So how do Indian voters look at the performance of the Narendra Modi government when it comes to foreign policy? Over the past week, we brought you the results of the India Today Mood the Nation poll on economics, on politics, on who would form the next government. Today, we will get you the responses to the questions on the handling of India's foreign policy and the key aspects of foreign policy and the voters' report card on this. So all that and more coming up on the news track. But before that, let me take you through the headlines I'm tracking tonight. Big diplomatic victory for India. Qatar releases 8 Indian Navy personnel. Prime Minister Modi to meet the Emir of Qatar on the 14th of February after his UAE tour. Third big jolt to the Congress in less than a month. Maharashtra heavyweight and former CM Ashok Chavan resigns. Sources say 10 to 12 Congress MLAs may leave with Chavan. Nitish Kumar wins the Bihar trust vote with 129 votes in favour. At least 5 RJD MLAs vote for the JDU-BJP government. RJD stages a walkout. Protesting farmers announce a Delhi Chalo march on the 13th of February. Security beefed up. Section 144 imposed in the national capital till the 12th of March. Tension grips Bengal once again after clashes in Sandeshkhali. Union Minister Smriti Irani slams the Mamata government, claims anti-Hindu hate crimes are on the rise in Bengal.
A day before Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Arab voyage, huge diplomatic win for India. Qatar releases 8 Indian Navy veterans. Prime Minister Modi flexes the Indian muscle. Next, the largest mandir in the Arab world. Decoding Modi's big mission West Asia. That's our top focus on the news track.
Especially given the kind of Hindutva appeal that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has, it is quite commendable that he's been able to achieve these big victories in the Gulf Arab countries. This is one of the big successes of Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy, but we'll be looking at foreign policy as a whole and the Modi government report card in the eyes of the Indian voter. But before that, as I said, it's a huge diplomatic victory for the Indian government. Qatar has released 8 Navy veterans who are accused of espionage. The former Navy officer's death sentence was commuted weeks after the Prime Minister's meeting with the Emir of Qatar on the sidelines of the COP28 summit in Dubai. Here's the full story.
The smiles on their faces and relaxed body language had to be seen to be believed. Not many thought this day would come. It was a sledgehammer blow on October 30th when news first filtered in that 8 former Indian Navy personnel had been arrested in Qatar on charges of espionage. That disbelief turned into despair when 8 were sentenced to death. The families of former Indian Navy personnel rushed to the Ministry of External Affairs seeking help. The MEA issued a statement saying the matter had been taken up with their counterparts in Qatar and consular access sought. Since the arrest on August 30th, it was a race against time to seek justice. The former Indian Navy personnel thanked both Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Amir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim Al Hamad Thani, for his personal intervention.
Without the intervention of Prime Minister Modi, it wouldn't be. आज हम आपके सामने खड़े नहीं हो रहे होते. अगर इंटरवेंशन नहीं होता एट दैट लेवल, हाईएस्ट लेवल, एंड स्पेशली गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया, उनके अथक प्रयास से कि वो कंसिस्टेंटली लगे रहे एंड वी आर देयर इन फ्रंट ऑफ
प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी और उनका पर्सनल इंटरवेंशन, उनका इंटरेक्शन, और एक और मौका लेना चाहता हूं कि थैंक करूंगा अमीर को कतर के, जिनके उनके इंटरेक्शन के कारण आज हम यहाँ खड़े हैं, जिस दिन का हमें बहुत बेसब्री से इंतजार।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi had raised the issue with the Amir of Qatar on the sidelines of COP28 in Dubai. Both External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval had repeatedly taken up the matter with their counterparts in Qatar.
A foreign policy that makes a difference to the lives of people, that to me is one very big change. Now, that change manifests itself in different places. You know, in the Gulf, yes, absolutely, I would say if there's one region which has undergone absolute sea change, it is actually India's relations with the Gulf.
Apart from the naval officers, Meenakshi Lekhi, MOS External Affairs and BJP leaders spoke of India's close ties with West Asia that played a key role in making the impossible possible.
बधाई के पात्र भारतीय हैं और हम प्रधानमंत्री जी का धन्यवाद देना चाहते हैं कि उनकी इंटरवेंशन के बाद जो है ये संभव हो पाया, और जो अमीर हैं कतर के, उनका भी आभार कि उन्होंने ये काम किया।
सबसे पहले तो मैं कहूँगा प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी का बहुत बहुत आभार। मोदी है तो मुमकिन है। आज से 45 दिन पहले इनकी फांसी की सज़ा को उम्र कैद में बदल दिया गया था, और अब भारत के नौसैनिक अधिकारियों को उनको वापस यहाँ पर लाकर एक दिखाया है कि हर एक जान की कीमत, हर भारतीय की जान की कीमत है।
Since 2015, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government has extensively engaged and invested diplomatically with West Asia and securing the release of Indian personnel just ahead of Alan Modi in Abu Dhabi, and the inauguration of the temple in Abu Dhabi adds another feather to India's diplomatic cap. With Geeta Mohan, Bureau Report, India Today.
Diplomatic win in Qatar comes just a day before the Prime Minister embarks on a two-day tour of the UAE. He'll be inaugurating the first Indian Hindu temple in the UAE and will also be interacting with the Indian diaspora at the Ahlan Modi event in Abu Dhabi.
Ahlan, commonly used in Arabic, means welcome. On his 7th visit to UAE in his decade-long prime ministership, he will be addressing the Indian diaspora, and the event is Ahlan Modi. One could register on this website earlier for an opportunity to meet and greet him in Abu Dhabi on 13th of February. Nearly 2,500 kilometers away from the national capital of India, in the United Arab Emirates, stands tall a Hindu temple, the first of its kind in the Middle East.
इस country में to have a temple was once upon a time next to impossible.
The Indian community living in the region are not only curious, they are excited.
We feel very proud, like we are volunteers over here and we were here since the start of this project.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited UAE in August 2015 during his first tenure. That was the first time an Indian Prime Minister landed in the country after 34 years. In response, UAE government gave permission for the construction of the temple.
मैं His Highness Crown Prince का सभी 125 करोड़ हिंदुस्तानियों की तरफ से हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करना चाहता हूं।
There are Hindu temples in Dubai and Jebel Ali, but these temples were not built in traditional Hindu style. BAP's Hindu temple, constructed on more than 20 acres of land, is built in Hindu stone architecture.
Modern structures tend to have steel infrastructure in place just to keep it in hold. But a traditional shikad stone temple doesn't have any steel. And so it's an ingenious use of science and technology.
The UAE government provided full support to the construction of the temple.
You see that combination of pink and white, so that's pink stone which has been carved, and all Indian artisans who've carved it in India and they've been assembled here. That's with a nice mix of white Italian marble.
The temple carvings were made in India and then brought to the UAE by sea. There are stories of Indian mythology from all parts of the country carved across the temple walls. Each pillar took a year for 4 craftsmen to carve. The selection process involves meticulously choosing pink sandstone from top-tier quarries in Rajasthan, along with white marble sourced from Italy as the main stones. These stones then undergo intricate carving procedures at designated sites in Gujarat, Rajasthan and Odisha, meticulously crafted by skilled heritage artisans. Elephants, symbolizing Hindu culture, are synchronistically put side by side with camels and Arabian horses to replicate the coming together of two cultures together in the construction of this temple.
When you move around the temple premises, you see that scenes from Ramayana have been shown here. This is Shabri and Ramji having her Jute Bear. How the Ramji, Lakshmanji and Ma Sita spent times during their exile. The entire Ramayana has been showed here.
The temple now awaits for the 14th February inauguration in the presence of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
This is just such a beautiful structure, a glorious temple. This coming up in the UAE, the first temple to come up in Abu Dhabi. And remember, this is happening when Prime Minister Modi is in power. Typically, you'd imagine, given the stereotype, that this is where there'd be tension between India and the Gulf Arab countries, like a Saudi Arabia, which is where Makkah Medina is, or a UAE, Qatar releasing these 8 Navy men just a day before Prime Minister gets to the Gulf Arab countries. So what we'll do is bring out all the questions from the Mood of the Nation done by India Today magazine, and we look at the government's report card when it comes to foreign policy in the eyes of the Indian voter. Raj Chingappa joins me, Group Editorial Director Publishing at India Today. We also have with us on this broadcast Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. We've got Ambassador Mohan Kumar, former Joint Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. We've got Dr. Wail Awad, Political Analyst, Senior International Correspondent, somebody who understands both the Gulf Arab countries and India and has been a long-standing watcher of India-Arab ties. I want to first go across to my colleague Akshita. Akshita Nagpal is in Abu Dhabi at the Bab's Temple, and it's looking absolutely glorious. Akshita, the organizers had come to our office to invite us all here. We're all here looking at your coverage, and it just does look to be a very, very beautiful structure, and most importantly, in an area at the heart of the Arab kingdom. For a temple of this nature to open up must be very special for all Hindus in that whole region.
Very, very true, Rahul. And I can tell you that pictures quite simply don't do justice to the beautiful monument behind me, wonderfully lit up now as, the sun sets here in Abu Dhabi. But as beautiful as the monument is, also hugely significant, hugely symbolic of the progress that we've seen in India-UAE ties. Prime Minister Modi will be here tomorrow in what he calls his second home. He's referred to UAE repeatedly as his second home. He's referred to Mohammed bin Zayed, MBZ, as his brother. And that chemistry, that bonhomie is translated in so many ways into great relations between India and UAE. The Prime Minister's 7th visit to UAE will be tomorrow, and there will be a bilateral that will take place. Besides that, of course, we're going to be seeing the Ahlan Modi event, which was supposed to be an unprecedented, historic Indian diaspora outreach, Rahul. It's been slightly scaled down because of the inclement weather here. There have been non-stop thunderstorms, but it still promises to be a massive, massive event. And then on February 14th, the Prime Minister will be here here where I am at the Baps Hindu Mandir to unveil this temple. And, the reason that the Prime Minister is also going to be here is because he understands, I'm sure the world will be watching this hugely significant moment where you have a Hindu temple for which land was given by the Abu Dhabi government. And as they say here at Baps, they say that, this is a Muslim king who's donated land for a Hindu temple. And there's nothing more that symbolizes how beautifully synchronized every culture here, whether it's India and UAE, India and the Middle East, really concerned.
Well, Akshita, we look forward to your coverage over the next couple of days. Thank you very much. Hugely envious of the kind of locale that Akshita is live from tonight. Do catch her coverage on India Today all through tomorrow and the day after. I want to now just look at the India Today report card on the government's handling of different aspects of foreign policy. I'll take the first larger umbrella question around how people perceive the handling of all aspects of foreign policy by the Modi government. Rate the foreign policy of the Modi government. This is the question. I just want to walk across and take you through the responses to this question. So when the question was asked, is the handling of foreign policy excellent, good, poor or very poor? Here are the answers that we saw. 46% of the respondents in the India Today Mood of the Nation poll said that the handling of foreign policy was excellent. 46% saying it's excellent, 24% saying the handling of foreign policy was good, 15% saying the handling of foreign policy was poor, 8% saying the handling of foreign policy was very poor. So 46% rating it to be great, 24% saying good, 15% saying poor, and 8% saying very poor. That's the report card on the first question. With that, I want to go across to Raj Chingappa, who apart from editing India Today magazine is one of our sharpest foreign affairs watchers. Raj, the stereotype would suggest that when you've got a Prime Minister who is so openly a proponent of Hindutva, that the Gulf Arab countries would not like it, that there'd be tension and fracture. Instead, we're seeing Prime Minister Modi dominate hearts in the UAE and in other countries in a manner that no recent Prime Minister has. What do you make of this, the stereotype and the reality that he's built?
I mean, if you add these two figures together that you had presented, they amount to 70%. And that 70% rating has been there for the last 3 or 4 MOTNs. Clearly, I mean, apart from the afterglow of the G20, where I think Prime Minister Modi's approach was unique. He brought it to the people rather than just one of those esoteric sort of gatherings of leaders. He made sure that it went right across, so the people became sensitized. And if you recall, one of the things they said, they see G20 as the second biggest achievement after Ram Mandir, or handling of international relations. The other thing is the way he's handled each of the major, India has faced major crises during this, in his second term, whether it is the Chinese border intrusion, whether it is the Russian war, the Gaza war subsequently, and the challenges that he's faced now in the Middle East. I think very, very smartly, Prime Minister Modi has built relations with Saudi Arabia, with UAE, and now with Qatar, which is a diplomatic coup to get our Navy personnel back at
Just
the
look
thick
at
of
the
this.
timing.
Brilliant
This
time.
is a new India punching way above its past weight category in global affairs. You know, if it was Xi Jinping or the President of the United States, you'd imagine for something like this to happen. 8 Indian Navy men coming back just a day before the PM goes there.
And, just to tell you, when we had interviewed the Prime Minister, we asked him these things on foreign affairs and what is his approach. And I think that's very important because he says we will be constructive. Wherever we find this friendship is there and we can develop that thing, but we will stand firm if we feel that either terror or other issues are there. So the clarity with which he brings to foreign policy, I think, is also very, very important in the ways. And finally, let's not forget, in a year, he has nuanced the balance in terms of Russia by importing oil. We had our national interests, so we had kept inflation down. Gaza, very rightly, condemned the kind of Hamas attack, but at the same time built relations with Hamas to say that, look, we need diplomacy, but terrorism will not be tolerated. And let's look at the other aspect. US, the fact that he has a highly successful visit to the US and Biden and him sign major protocols, including the co-production of the GE414 engine, which has never happened before, and the strengthening of Quad. So we have understood that China is a major problem, and so is Pakistan in some senses, more a shadow of thing. we have built our assets or our relations with the Gulf, which Pakistan had a huge sort of leverage, particularly among Islamic countries, and as well as made sure that when it came to the Indo-Pacific region and the US relations, we have built a structure that can contain, in some senses, or at least hold a bulwark against China.
Sushant Sareen, from the time when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru said no to a proposed seat in the United Nations Security Council, suggesting that it be given to China and that India could have this conversation later, to a time when the Indian government very unabashedly putting Indian interests first, apart from just being constructive, as Raj said, this is India using all the leverage it has. We're a big country, we're 1.4 billion people, you've got good economic ties with us. The Prime Minister putting it all out there to get these 8 Navy men back.
So Rahul, there are a couple of things which have happened. I think one is that India's weight has also grown. So I think if the Prime Minister understands it and is willing to fight in his particular weight category, since that's the analogy we are using, I think that's par for the course. Go back to the 1950s and just look at what India's condition was. Yes, Prime Minister Nehru would have been the modern day equivalent of a woke to some extent. Which Modi clearly is not. Modi is a very, very sharp operator, a guy who understands when he can drive a good bargain, and he's not going to shy away from driving a good bargain, and he's not even afraid of taking risks. So I think there are changes in the objective conditions, but of course there is...
No, so the point I was making, Sushant, was that India is now punching above its weight category. We are punching almost like a United States or a China, where we've decided this is the weight category we belong to, and you're forcing the world to virtually acknowledge that it's not as if the weight category is something that everyone's open about and they're happy for you to rise. You're saying, okay, this is the weight category I think I now belong to, and this is how I'll act.
No, but it's not that you think that you belong to that weight category, you've actually started belonging to that weight category. Look, if in purchasing power parity terms, you're the third largest economy in the world, and in absolute terms, you are the fifth, going on to becoming the fourth in the next 1 or 2 years, then clearly you are in a certain category of nations which you were not when you were at number 20 or number 25. So clearly your weight has increased, number one. Number two, the amount of your global footprint of your diplomacy has also increased. Yes, you've also hustled your diplomacy, and I don't think there's anything wrong in that. For example, Raj was talking about what we've done with the Middle East. I think it's remarkable. For decades, we had allowed the Middle East to go, as almost like a monopoly of the Pakistanis, because of precisely, when Rahul, you express a surprise that, how come there is this government which has a very Hindu kind of an approach, making good relations with, the Arab world, which is predominantly Muslim. This is a binary which people like us have created in our heads. I don't think that's a binary which Mr. Modi has, or that's a binary which the Arabs have, or for that matter, that's a binary which, Christian countries have, the United States or the UK or any of the other countries. Countries operate with each other on the basis of their interests, and when they see interests converging, they will engage with each other. Are you confident enough to engage at your own terms? And I think that confidence Mr. Modi and his team bring to the table, and that is what has really changed. That they are not afraid to actually, go ahead, protect India's interest, and manage the contradictions of protecting India's interest while they are engaging with rival players.
Okay, so Vailavad, you've seen India's rise, you understand the Gulf Arab world better than most. How are you looking at, for example, the fact that we have this massive BAPS temple opening in Abu Dhabi, land being given by the Emir, the fact that he's going to Qatar a day after, and also ensuring that before he goes, Qatar releases these 8 Indian sailors. They didn't want to do it. They had already sentenced these Indian Navy personnel. So as far as the court is concerned, this really is an exception that's been pulled by the Qatari establishment for the Indian nation, as it were. So how do you see this happen, and why do you think it's happening?
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you for your compliment and nice word. And the fact of the matter remains that India-Arab relation has been deeply rooted in history. Let's put it that way. I mean, till 1961, the Gulf country was using the Indian rupees, and that's where we know that there are more than 8 million Indian permanently residents of the GCC country, and you have 14 million Indian visiting annually. So therefore, there are more than $75 billion revenue coming from there. So Indian diaspora playing a major role in the integrations and into the development and the infrastructure building of the nations of these countries. So therefore, Indians have been a forefront in many of the countries. Let me put it this way. If we speak of the foreign policy of India in this regard, I think we are in the face of pragmatism in the Indian foreign policy with the personal touch. The personal touch of the Prime Minister have been seen that he has been following each and every country where Indian diaspora are available, and he made it one of his first priority that to meet with them and interact. So therefore, there is a major replay on this. And I wanted to add one more point here, which is maybe, and many of our colleagues on the panel knows that this is not the first temple in Abu Dhabi. In fact, there is Gurdwara, there are temples. There is one, the Lord Krishna temple in Muscat. There is Lord Krishna in Bardubai. There is Shiva temples. There is also Shri Krishna temple in another prominent in Hindu in Dubai. You have in Bahrain also Shiva temple. So all these temples have been there. But to see that we are in the 21st century and you see a new temple being built in Abu Dhabi, it is also a message that the UAE is trying to give to the Indian and to the rest of the world. It is a harmony, interfaith, and also coexistence among nations. And I think that is one of the major steps to integrate the Indian community into the Arab community.
That's on the softer, more spiritual, religious side. The building and the pran pratishtha of this huge temple complex. The other is the more muscular dimension, by Lawad, of India's foreign policy, getting these 8 Navy men back just a day before the Indian Prime Minister goes. I mean, Xi Jinping can pull it off. For Joe Biden, because he's president of the United States, most certainly can. I can't think of too many people who would be able to do something like this.
Absolutely, and you should remember that India have signed a huge deal with the oil, with gas, with the Qatar, lesser than the price that's been given to the Chinese, and also for 50 years ahead. Therefore, there is a huge relation between India and the Gulf state, and Indian food security, oil security, diaspora security lies in the mindset of the Indian government. And I think that is a compliment should be given to the South Bloc that they kept the sensitivity and the secrecy of these issues between the two capitals. That's why it was solved. Otherwise, if it had been thrown into the public domain, it would have been a disaster.
Michael Kugelman is director of the Wilson Center's South Asia Institute. You've tracked all of South Asia for a long time. You're seeing what's happening in Pakistan and writing about it. And now, just a day before the Indian Prime Minister goes to the UAE, getting the Indian Navy men back from Qatar, from your prism in Washington, D.C., what are you making of how India's position on the global high table seems to be rising fast?
Right. Well, going back, Rahul, to an expression you used before about India punching above its weight. For many years here in Washington and other Western capitals, one of the major criticisms of India's foreign policy is that it punches below its weight, that it talks a good game, has many ambitions, but we're not seeing it play out on the global stage. And I think that's a really vivid reflection of how things have changed, that indeed we have seen over the last decade India so much more present and involved and central to international relations than it had been in the decades prior to that. Not that it was insignificant in the decades prior to the last 10 years, but clearly its footprint has deepened. And I certainly would emphasize its engagement with the Middle East as a big reflection of that, as well as its recent engagements with its South Asian neighbors, excluding Pakistan. If you look at how it has been involved in these new initiatives under the DINSTEC rubric to develop cross-border connectivity projects, that's pretty significant. But I think that in engaging why we've seen this change, why we've seen this more active, engaged India on the global stage over the last decade, I think it goes hand in hand with India's economic growth story. This is one big reason why so much of the world is so keen to engage with India. It is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. So everyone wants to trade and engage commercially, but also more broadly with such a critical global economic player. And I think that also helps explain a point that you had made earlier about some of these countries in the Gulf and the Muslim world that might otherwise be concerned about some of the domestic politics playing out in India, including the Hindutva issue, but they want to engage with India commercially. They see it as a critical market, which it is. Now, all that said, I think that there still is work to be done. I think that when it comes to India's competition with China, that certainly is a challenge. Dealing with the border issue remains a challenge. And if you want to talk about India seeking to project itself as a voice of the global South and a bridge to the global South, that's something that China has been claiming to do as well. And I would argue that if you look at Latin America and Africa, China is much more present in those regions than India is, at least today. So clearly that's a challenge that India continues to face. But on the whole, absolutely, looking at over the last decade, significant changes in how India has been so much more entrenched with its deepening global footprint on the global stage.
Mohan Kumar, what do you think explains the successes of Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy with the Gulf Arab countries? We've had some successes with Africa, some also with Latin America, but just the extent of success, the unlikeliness of the success and the extent of the success, how do you explain it?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Having spent 4.5 years as India's ambassador to Bahrain and having looked at the Gulf Cooperation Council states, I have to give top-notch marks to the personal diplomacy of Prime Minister Modi. The only thing that works in the Gulf countries is personal diplomacy. Please bear in mind that Prime Minister this is his 7th visit to the United Arab Emirates. He has invested a lot of time and effort knowing these monarchs personally. And while everything else that your panelists are saying in terms of increased clout, in terms of the fact that these countries are investing in India, all of that is valid. I would say the most important factor is personal diplomacy. The personal diplomacy exercised by Prime Minister Modi has also led to a dehyphenation between India and Pakistan, something that we have not been able to accomplish in the past.
So what do you think he's doing which other Indian PMs weren't?
Well, to be absolutely honest, and I try to be apolitical about my foreign policy analysis. Prime Minister simply didn't go as often as he did. That's the difference. This Prime Minister never misses an opportunity to meet these sovereigns, especially UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. Never. In the margins of COP28, he met them. Margins of UN General Assembly, if he goes, he meets them.
Why does he say the UAE is his second home?
The UAE is second home because he genuinely believes he has a good rapport with the UAE sovereign. And you must also appreciate that this coincides with the desire of these countries to have actually adopt the liberal mantleship. They want to be known as liberal monarchies. They don't want to be known as monarchies which are fundamentalist. So it's a happy coincidence from that point of view. But really, at least in so far as the transformational diplomacy in the Gulf is concerned, you simply have to give full marks to the amount of time and effort that he has invested. You know as well as I do that in these countries, there is only one person that matters, and that's the monarch. So
Prime Minister Modi, in some of these images that we are playing out, Mohan Kumar goes out and hugs these kings. Now, I'm sure in their country, nobody's going to dare hug these kings, right? How does that play out? Here is a democratically elected Prime Minister, far from being king, coming and hugging, like this traditional Indian jhappi, and they seem quite pleased with it. From at least from the images, from the body language, what we can make out, they seem quite okay with it.
I think it depends on how you do it, and I genuinely think the Prime Minister has managed to, really master this technique. It's really seen as a very, very warm gesture. Because it could be seen as rude if a Christian or a Western leader were to do it. But coming from India, the Prime Minister is able to convey this message that, listen, this is how we treat each other in the Orient. So there is a bit of that as well. But I would really, you have to give full marks to the Prime Minister for having repeatedly made visits to those countries, trying to establish a personal rapport. That is the only thing that can get you a pardon from the Emir.
And also remember, personalized diplomacy doesn't work in a country like China. Prime Minister Modi tried it, didn't work. There are too many structures and wheels within wheels in China for that to work. But with the Gulf Arab countries, a personal touch to diplomacy most certainly seems to be working. I want to come now to the second set of questions from the Mood of the Nation opinion poll, and we'll go to Pakistan, whether if we should have talks with Pakistan. But before that, let me give you a quick update about what's happening in Pakistan. We just went to the polls recently. Suspense over who will form the next government in Pakistan continues as the results continue to trickle for 2 days after the polls. Independent candidates backed by the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf look dominant with 101 seats, while the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz and Pakistan People's Party won on 75 and 54 seats in the Legislative Assembly. The PMNL, the PPP have stepped up efforts to form a coalition government. Meanwhile, PTI-backed candidate Shehzad Farooq, who was contesting against Nawaz Sharif's daughter, gathered PTI workers and protested outside over alleged rigging in the elections. Rawalpindi police also fired tear gas on women protesters. The PTI has been demanding immediate resignations of the Chief Election Commissioner and other officials of the Election Commission of Pakistan. At this moment, looks as if the PPP of the Bhuttos and the PMNL of the Sharifs are likely to come together in some kind of a power-sharing formula to form the next government. So with this, let me come now to the question that we asked in the Mood of the Nation poll, which is about whether India should have talks with Pakistan. 26% said yes, 55% of the respondents said no. Rachingappa, there's been a lot of talk in Delhi and Islamabad that if Nawaz Sharif were to come back to power, if Modi comes back to power in May, then there's a chance that they could give Rapprochement another shot. All that seems to have come undone because you've got now a coalition government with the PTI doing much better than General Munir would have expected. And you've got, I mean, India stays on course in the way that it was, but all calculations in Pakistan seem to have gone out of the window.
You know, Rahul, as someone who's watched Pakistan elections since 1996, there's a sense of deja vu. History repeats itself.
When did this happen again?
2008.
Pakistani army wanted something which didn't happen?
Well, if you recall, in 2008, when Musharraf was toppled in the sense that he had tried to promote a king's power, it was Nawaz Sharif and Zardari that came together to form a national government. They didn't have the majority of their own. And we have seen this right through.
No, but at that time, the Pak army, it wasn't as if they explicitly said they wanted something in the opposite.
Well, they certainly didn't want a very powerful political dispensation because Musharraf, if you're General Musharraf, who was that time the CEO and the president and everything else that was in charge of Pakistan, he had taken, locked horns with the lawyers and the courts, and that was his undoing. We had actually built very good relations with Pakistan on this. The larger point is it's not the political establishment that really deals with India. For India to have good relations with Pakistan, it has to have an army counterpart that is willing to do so. Now, with regard to, there was moves, as we know, when General Bajwa was there to build a certain relationship, the LOC had gone silent. Every change provides an opportunity for both the countries to engage. The point is that India will stand firm when it comes to terrorism, and that's something, and Kashmir. These are two big issues that India, that stops forward movement of it. It is Pakistan's pragmatism to realize that Kashmir now is, almost like a closed chapter. They may not say so, but they will do, and the other thing was terror, because their economy is in tatters. It needs to demonstrate that it is not supporting terror, that it needs all the IMF and other aid that is there. And so you do have a window of opportunity that is going to come up once. It's going to be a really tough job for anyone to run Pakistan.
No, but the problem is if Michael Kugelman, since you've been writing so much about Pakistan, given that no one party came to power on their own, how does that impact any potential rapprochement which may have been attempted post-May? Because now you have a coalition government, you have an army that's weaker internally than it's ever been. You probably in the end have Nawaz Sharif, Zardari coalition government. So how does that impact what's happening between India and Pakistan? More importantly, what's happening in Pakistan itself?
Right. Well, I would argue that despite the striking result of PTI-sponsored independents taking more seats than any other single party, I think in the end the army in Pakistan will get exactly what it was hoping to get, and that is a weak and fractious coalition comprised of parties that it prefers these days: the PMLN, the PPP. So I think it'll be a government that looks a lot like the previous government, the PDM government that served out the rest of Imran Khan's term. Now, in terms of what that could mean for India, well, I think that the fact that this will be a weak government, it may not last very long in Pakistan, that gives it very little political space to take politically risky steps, such as potentially trying to reach out to India. And I would argue that Nawaz, of course, is someone that has articulated a desire to look into outreach to India, particularly from a commercial perspective. I do think that he is one that would be willing to look at the idea of trying to open up more border trade with India. There are some pretty significant, influential business constituencies from Punjab within the PMLN party that would support that. But I think that it'll be very difficult to do that, given how weak this coalition will be. And of course, as was said before, ultimately it comes down to the army as to what position Pakistan might take vis-a-vis India. And I think that the Pakistani army, in my sense, has not veered from its position that Kashmir has to change. There has to be change in vis-a-vis Kashmir before there could be serious talks.
Sushant, Sareen, the mood in India seems very firm. 55% of the respondents in our poll saying, no matter what, there should be no talks with Pakistan. Full stop. I mean, there is no if, no but, no prospect of rapprochement in the minds of these 55% people. They're saying, no, India should not have talks with Pakistan.
Rahul, I'm kind of enthused to see that a sense of realism has dawned on the Indian public opinion, if your survey is correct. Because it would be plain stupid to try and reach out to Pakistan at this point in time. Number one, what has happened in Pakistan on the 8th of February is unprecedented. I think if there is a precedent you have to look at, you have to go back to 1970 elections. I don't think the 1996 elections are comparable in any manner whatsoever with what has happened in this particular election, against all odds. So that is one. Secondly, I am all for that if an opportunity grants itself. But how do we define an opportunity? Is an opportunity simply that, okay, fine, I'll come to your house, you come to my house, we'll exchange a few gifts. Okay, should we try and open up some trade? What's in it for me? So let's be, we were in the last session, we were talking about, the kind of pragmatism and the kind of realism that Modi brings into diplomacy. The bottom line is, we've been doing this to death. Like, let's just meet the Pakistanis. Let's have, some siri pie with them or some other goddamn thing with them. And then, it's all the Punjabis will meet and, do papi jappi. Where has it led us? So, my question is, be bloody minded about it, be cold hearted about it. If you are getting what you want, go ahead and strike a deal. But will you get what you want when a guy like Asim Munir, I'm not even sure how long he stays in power now, because I disagree with people who say that the Pakistan army will control everything. I think things are spiraling out of control of the Pakistan army. If they get a weak government, that weak government can't deliver on majority of the issues that Pakistan has to deal with. And Nawaz Sharif, if he's looking at a legacy to leave to his daughter, he's going to actually destroy that legacy if he takes over power, because he will have to do things which will destroy his politics for all time to come. Number one. Number two, you have, even if Asim Munir was to stay, please listen to what Asim Munir has been telling people. We cannot have reconciliation with a country like India, which has never accepted our existence. Number one. Number two, he has spoken about India in terms of a civilizational conflict. Now, if we are going to be, at least the public of India is not, fooled by this talk of rapprochement with Pakistan. But if somebody in government wants to go and, kiss and make up and again, suffer the same consequences that we have suffered in the past, we can do it again, but it's not going to lead us anywhere. So I am very happy to see the result of your survey. I think this shows a sense of realism in the Indian public, which I didn't think it would be
while the government's had a stellar record in its foreign affairs with the Gulf Arab countries, our government's record closer home hasn't been quite as stellar. And when the question was asked, rate India's relationship with neighbors. We've had problems with Sri Lanka, of course with Pakistan, we've had problems with Nepal. Although with Bangladesh, that's the one bright spark. But if you look at all of this together, it's been a very mixed report card. And I think that comes out in the Mood of the Nation survey as well. Rate India's relationship with its neighbors, worrisome, say 27% of the respondents. Doesn't really matter, say 30%. I disagree very strongly with that 30% because, of course, your relationship with your neighbors matters. So I don't know who these 30% are, but anyway, they're entitled to their view. And has improved, say, only 26%. So Raj Chingappa, the record in response to this question, very mixed, as is the case with our foreign policy with our neighbors.
not surprising. And I think, beyond the Pakistan and what we saw in Maldives, episodical things in Maldives that has happened, that has fluctuated from very good relations to ones that's really deteriorated. Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, Bangladesh, they all have their interests. We've really built good relations with Bangladesh. I think really what we need to look at is, and that is why when you mentioned earlier that the Prime Minister invested a lot of time with Xi Jinping before, the intrusions happened at this thing, or the border dispute happened over there in whatever you call the word, right? The border intrusions or whatever is there. And I think the shadow of China, whether it is in dealing with Pakistan, whether it is dealing with Maldives, even Myanmar. So we have to find a way, both like we did, which is construction, which is what he said, be constructive and cooperative, but stand firm.
So I want to take our viewers through the response to the question on the Maldives. And this is interesting, because I would have thought with all the patriotism, people will say, nahi jana bhai Maldives. 63% when they were asked, will you boycott a trip to Maldives, said yes, we are boycotting a trip to Maldives. Only 18% said no. So 63% saying we are not going to the Maldives. Only 18% are willing to say no, we still want to go to the Maldives regardless. So that's a very big number. 6 out of 10 saying they no longer want to go to the Maldives. Quickly take you through the other responses. Rate India's response to the Niger killing. Handled it well, say 47% of the respondents. Overreacted, say 10% of the respondents. Should have been more aggressive, say 19% of the respondents. I don't know what more aggression they were looking for, but 19% saying should have been more aggressive, but 47% saying India handled it well. Opinion on Israel's counter strike on Gaza. Israel is committing genocide, say 29% of the respondents. 46% of the respondents, while Awad in India think Israel has done no wrong. Now this is a country scarred by terror, and despite all the condemnation in the Arab world, 46% of the respondents in our Mood of the Nation poll say Israel has done no wrong.
Well, I think it depends on what you show on your screen and to make a public opinion. That's what one of the facts, not your channel, I'm saying in general, the media have been propagating about the Palestinian, and everybody denying that the Palestinians have been suffering for the last 75 years, and they are at the receiving end. So it's not a war that the Palestinians started in the 7th of October, but it has been annihilation of the whole of Palestine by the Israelis and refusing to have a two-state solution. So therefore, I think these are issues has to be dealt not with the small kind of interactions, but it has to be a long haul history where the whole world now is standing up in the arm, looking at these pictures, finding this death of the people and killing, and this carnage has to be put to an end. Then we can see the public opinion will definitely change, because we are all human and we all should react to the human suffering. Therefore, there should be no suffering at the end and no killing of any civilian. Having said that, I would say also public opinion. I'm always with the public opinion of a good relation. I am a peace activist who does not want to see anybody dying of a war.
Sure.
So therefore, I will always go with the minorities who are wanted to have peace with the neighbor and coexistence, and that's what India has been saying all over the world, and I've been living in this world for the last 40 years in South Asia and Southeast Asia, and I can tell you that Indians have been showing their patience, and especially a matter related to cross-border terrorism. It's intolerable in India, and therefore there has to be some sort of kind of approach for all the neighbors, including the issue of Palestine and the issue of Pakistan.
Sure. So in this broadcast, we had an opportunity to go through all the questions on foreign policy from the India Today Mood of the Nation opinion poll. I want to thank my guests for joining us. And in the United States, pop star has become a major issue of foreign affairs, because what Taylor Swift says on the US presidential elections is literally what a lot of American pundits think will determine who wins in the US. Would you believe that? And Taylor and Travis lit up the Super Bowl finals like never before. The world's biggest pop star sets off another round of social media friendly after the Super Bowl finals. Details on this foreign policy, not entertainment, not music, on this foreign policy issue coming up on the other side of a quick break. Stay with us.
Pure Wash electronic seat by Pakala. Wish everything was this intelligent.
Get ready for an immersive journey into the heart of news, politics, and insights that matter. Join India Today now on WhatsApp. Scan the QR code.
Sveda by Pakala. Wish everything cared for your skin.
Get ready for an immersive journey into the heart of news, politics, and insights that matter. Join India Today now on WhatsApp. Scan the QR code.
Colors by Pakala makes you wish everything was as vibrant.
Get ready for an immersive journey into the heart of news, politics, and insights that matter. Join India Today now on WhatsApp. Scan the QR code.
You're on board the news track. This year's Super Bowl final was no ordinary Super Bowl because this time the world's biggest pop star Taylor Swift was there. No, she wasn't performing